Hi everyone, welcome everybody back again here on Learn Agile Practices. I'm Dan the Dev, and I'm back here for our weekly 25 minutes together in my weekly podcast. Today I'm going to focus on a very important topic for me, one that made me suffer in the latest years. So I studied about it and tried to learn how to suffer a bit more less. And the topic is asynchronous work and remote work. And I know that most people will not agree with me, but I love strong opinions. So today I will bring my strong opinion about asynchronous work. Before starting, as always, please remember to help me in growing and help me with my content creation side project. So please, if you like my content and want to help me grow, subscribe to the channel, follow me, leave some comments to let me know what you think about this topic. Come and follow me on LinkedIn, which is my main social media. Follow me there. I post daily or weekly content about Learn Agile, how to learn agile practices in software development, etc. So I really hope you can find my content valuable and therefore find a reason to follow me. And share the episode with everyone you think might be interested. Now, I'll leave you with the jingle and then we start. So, asynchronous work is a very big topic, and in the latest years has become even more important because it is strongly related, usually, to remote work. First of all, I think it's important to state my main point about remote and asynchronous work. The fact that we work remotely doesn't necessarily mean that we need to work asynchronously. In other words, we have to acknowledge that working remotely and working asynchronously are two orthogonal and completely different and unrelated decisions. It's not mandatory to work asynchronous when working remotely. Those are two different decisions that we need to be aware of the benefits and the negative side of both of them. So I want to start by giving some definitions of these two approaches to work because I think those definitions can help in clarifying what I think about it. The easier one is remote work. Remote work basically means that we work from different physical locations within the team members. So we have a team that works together, but those people are located in different places. So, for example, the simpler example is that everyone works from his own home. So, the meaning of remote work is that we just are in different physical locations. Asynchronous work, on the other hand, means that we work across different times. So, basically, not in real time. It means that we might be in different time zones, so our working hours are different, or it just means that I like to work in the morning, so I can connect in the morning at 4 a.m. and work before and work from there from 4 a.m. to lunch, and maybe someone else can think that he prefer to work in the afternoon. So he starts working when I finish my work, and we can also share some hours, but basically asynchronous work means that we are working at different times. As you can see from definitions, there's nothing that is actually forcing us to work at different times when we work from different physical locations. The physical location where we work from, it's a different decision from the working hours we apply. Those two decisions, those two approaches to work are usually put together because of the recent boom, especially after the pandemic, of remote work, and especially global remote work, right? A lot of companies today has global remote teams, so they hire across all over the world. So they have people working from Brazil and people working from France, and they obviously cannot work at the same time, or even sometimes they doesn't even share some hours. And so they decide to work asynchronously. And then some of those companies, like GitLab, for example, they became um, reference for others trying to do good work when working remotely. So working asynchronously became basically a sort of a proposed standard when working remote. Still, I think this is not necessarily a good decision. It's not even a bad decision. It's just a decision. Working remotely has a lot of pros and a lot of cons. The same goes for asynchronous work. It has a lot of good benefit on some kind of things that we do in our work, but it also have some really bad consequences on some other stuff that we do daily in our work. And my main problem with asynchronous work is that most companies sell it as a silver bullet. Most companies sell this as a decision with only benefits. But it is not. It is a decision with its own trade off. So the point is that this is not true. It's not about working asynchronously being bad, but it's about working asynchronously having some consequences. Okay? So that's my point. I'm not against asynchronous work entirely, but I'm against going 100% asynchronously, especially on some kind of work that are inherently better and produce inherently better results when working in sync and working together in real time. On the other hand, they have some bad consequences when working asynchronously. Also, my other main point is that companies should acknowledge that. It's totally fine, even if I don't agree or I partially agree. I don't have a problem with companies going 100% async. I worked in such companies. It's not the best approach, in my opinion, and I didn't like it. But I just don't like that companies try to sell it as someone inherently good. It's not necessarily good. And the problem is that sometimes it seems that they just hide the bad consequences. They try to hide it and sell these as a benefit, but they doesn't acknowledge the problems that asynchronous work is causing. But sometimes they doesn't even see the negative side of this decision, and this is the biggest problem in my opinion, because when you know that there is a trade-off, you can handle it, you can manage the downside. But when you only see the positive consequences, you are basically missing all the negative consequences. So you are just suffering from them without even acknowledging them and without even notice that they exist. So that's what I'm against for. I want companies to be aware of the consequences of their decision if they decide to go asynchronously. Now, I think that it's interesting for these to explain better my idea, to try to make some example and going a bit more in deep. As I said, working remotely basically means only that we work from different places. And while some years ago it was probably necessary to also work asynchronously when working from different locations, because communication systems wasn't as powerful as today. Today we can basically work together in real time even when working from different locations. So something that once was probably a better decision, where the positive downside was a lot bigger than the negative downsides, well, today they are basically balanced. Positive and negative downside have the same weight. So now, today has become a trade off. And when it comes to remote work, I think that you should decide to go remote for a good number of reasons, such as you don't need to have an office that costs a lot of money. You can maybe just have a smaller location in a co-working, for example, for people that want to go there, or you can not have one fixed location and just allow people to go on their own co-work if they want. You can hire from different locations, and this can make it easier to hire better people and more skilled people. So there are good reasons. It's just even just to offer an additional benefit, right? Because people doesn't have to commute to work, so they can also work for you. Even if you're in a big city, for example, and they live in a small city, which is a bit far, and they have to take the car and drive for like 2 hours if they need to come in the office, but they don't have to commute if they work remote. So it's a good way to offer also a benefit, right? But then, of course, there are trade-offs. On the other side, there are negative downsides because communication is harder. You need to introduce some other approaches to communication, because when you are in the office, you need someone, you just go at his own desk and try to see if you find it. And when you find it, you just interrupt him, which is good and bad because you interrupt his work. So it's a problem because people can be more easily interrupted. But on the other side, people are always available, even if they don't want to, even if you have your own AirPods and you are working with music right in your ears, but then people can come there and touch you and interrupt you because you are there. You are available by definition. And it's a problem of the office environment on one side because you can always be interrupted, which is not good. But on the other side, it's also a good thing because you are always available. And I'm not mentioning availability because I think people need to be controlled, but I'm mentioning availability because sometimes people need help. And some people can help others to maybe unlock if they have a problem or if they have any kind of issues. So availability is an important part of the working hours. And also, when we communicate synchronously, we most likely communicate by speaking to each other. And when we communicate in the same physical place, we can see each other, have nonverbal communications, we can be together and share feelings in a more deep way. There's no filter, right? When we communicate from remote, there's always the screen in the middle. If we turn the camera on, and please turn the camera on in every meeting with less than 10 people, because the camera is important in communication. Seeing each other is important in communication. So you miss something in the way you communicate. You can understand each other if you still speak with the camera on and in a real-time conversation, right? Speaking by words, but it's still not the same as speaking in person. You cannot share a whiteboard. And I know there are digital whiteboards. Miro is an incredible, amazing tool, and there are others today, but I don't know, the feeling of the real physical whiteboard, for me, it's invaluable. And also, another thing from an agile perspective that I want you to think about, if you have a board, right, a Kanban board to track the work, you can have a digital board, and they are amazing tools. They are powerful, much more powerful than the physical board, because in the physical board, if you want to track a ticket in a board, you typically use post-it, right? And the post-it is limited, has limited space to write. Well, that was actually a feature of the board, because the ticket should just be a placeholder for a conversation. It shouldn't be a collection of a lot of details analyzed in advance upfront before developing. That wasn't the purpose of a user story or a task in a Kanban board. So the digital workspace is giving us an opportunity to have more space in the board, more informations stored in the board, but then it's easy to overuse it and use the tool in a bad way. So we always need to think about trade-offs. But my opinion is that still, if you try to understand these limits and you try to manage these limits, working remotely, it's a good trade-off, right? The positive benefits are slightly bigger than the negative side. But still, we have negative side and we need to acknowledge them. As I said, one of the problems of remote work is communication, because communicating from different locations is harder. Well, here we come to asynchronous work. If we introduce asynchronous working hours in our teams and between our team members, then communication becomes even harder. We don't just communicate not physically but digitally, but we also communicate at different times. Sometimes this is good, sometimes this is not good. Again, asynchronous communication is good for deep work, right? I'm focused and I know that even if I receive something, I can ignore the notification, I can answer in an asynchronous way, right? Take my time. And this is a good approach. But I usually suggest, because I like to work in sync and just use async when it makes sense, or that's what I try to do, I always suggest that, if I write you a message and maybe I'm asking for help, right? It's okay if you don't reply to my Slack message in 30 minutes, right? If you don't reply in an hour, might be a problem, because if I need help, you don't help me, I'm stuck. It's a problem. We have some work that it's stuck. So I think this requires a balance, but you cannot have a balance if you are asynchronous. If you are asynchronous, I need to accept that every message I send to my colleague might require at least a day to get an answer, to get a reply. And that's a problem. That's a problem because work will move slower, a lot slower. We will have waste. I have seen situations where 30 minutes developing and testing work pull request was approved after 5 days. So the lead time of a 30 minutes piece of work that could have had, let's say, 2 hours of lead time became 40 hours of work, 5 days. This is a problem because basically what I'm saying is that asynchronous work raise the cost of every feature or piece of code we develop, raise the opportunity to make mistakes, raise the opportunity to miss pieces between team members. And most important thing is that it brings you to have a slower feedback loop, a longer feedback loop. I could have a quicker feedback loop after my 30 minutes per request and maybe expect a review in an hour or two, and then go to test environment, make some additional tests, etc. And the feedback loop is very short. And for a very, very small piece of work, I can release it in half a day. So I'm encouraged in releasing small pieces of work, right? And we all know that doing continuous integration is better, brings less risk, it's a better way of working. You cannot do it in asynchronous work, because if I work for 2 hours and then I need to wait 5 days, then it's very, very likely that I will try to add additional stuff to that piece of work and make that piece of work bigger, and therefore a riskier change, a more dangerous change, because I need to wait. That's a problem. So basically, asynchronous work, I think, makes it harder to apply best practices in software development. And that's mostly because I think that software development, as you all know, I think that it's much, much better when it's done as a team work. So it's a teamwork, it's not individual work. We don't need to think about software development as individuals doing their piece of work and then putting it together somehow. It's about a team developing a software, especially when you work on a product, on a digital product. So what I'm trying to say is asynchronous work is great in some things, for some kind of work, but not for every kind of work. For example, when there are problems, asynchronous work is a problem. When you need to brainstorm ideas, asynchronous work is a problem. Putting people together and try to brainstorm an idea is much more powerful. You can collect starting ideas and therefore collect data asynchronously. It's a great approach. So you can kick off the meetings faster, but then the communication is much better to apply, to happen in a synchronous work. The best example I always make are retrospectives. It's a great idea to collect topics for a retrospective in asynchronous way, but then the conversation must happen synchronously, because that conversation is the important part of a retrospective. Of course, the actions that we decide to take at the end of the retro are super important, but the conversation, the fact that we as a team try to work together to improve our work, is the real value, and it must happen synchronously. Okay, I'm done for today. I just want to quickly recap what I tried to say today. Remote and asynchronous work are two different things, two orthogonal decisions. We can work in the same physical place or in a different physical place from our colleague, and this is remote work. And then we can work at the same working hours or at different working hours, and this is asynchronous work. Actually, even if we share working hours, we can decide to work asynchronously. Basically, we put an asynchronous expectation in how we communicate to each other. Still, I think that there is a big problem in how this kind of approach, if we apply asynchronous work in everything we do daily, we slow the feedback loop too much. Okay, we need a faster feedback loop. Okay, I know, people love asynchronous work, but the fact is that I like asynchronous work. I just don't like when asynchronous work is overused, because it has a lot of downsides, and people seems that don't see those downsides sometimes, and this is what worry me a lot. But let me know what you think. So you can, as I said, comment on YouTube, comment on Spotify, on every platform you are following this podcast, or you can come on my LinkedIn profile and you can comment the post where I shared the episode. Let me know what you think, and see you next week with a new Italian episode of the podcast. And until next time, happy coding.